The two-party system that's governed the UK since the war basically just had a near-death experience, but many people are still pretending it was only a flesh wound, so let's talk about it. This is Editor's Desk, the show where we give you a behind-the-scenes look at what's happening in the news, in the media, and today I want to tackle the May elections, but also the realignment that's happening with political parties in the UK. Because by the time you watch this, chances are the results from the May the 7th elections are in. And I don't think it really matters what the numbers are. I think the story is the same. And that story, right, is that for the first time in living memory, both the Labour and the Conservatives are being squeezed from opposite sides, in opposite directions, at the same time, and none of them seem to have a credible plan to recover or how they're going to build back. Just to give you a sense of what's at stake in this May elections, you have just shy of 5,000 council seats all across 136 councils that are up for grabs. You have London, Welsh, Scottish governments are also voting on the same day. This is basically the biggest subnational elections for a generation, and it's all taking place on May the 7th. Now, we could do a detailed video, and we did contemplate that, on the seat counts, who won what seat, who has the most. But I don't think that's important, right? It's what the seat counts exposes that's really fascinating. So when you think about Labour go into this elections basically defending about 2,196 seats. Most of those seats they won in 2022. At this stage, the party got 35%, right? Now they are polling around 20%. So they've clearly lost a step there. The Conservatives, they're defending just over 1,000 seats. They are polling 18%. Reform, and it's very important to note that, even though Nigel Farage is everywhere, Reform are still a very, very new party because, 4 years ago, they had almost no seats, right? Literally 0 seats. Now they are polling plus 27%, and now they're contesting every ward in the country as well. The Greens, specifically under Zach Polanski, are polling 12 to 14%. And obviously they got a new leader, they got momentum from the Gorton by-election they won. So now, you could see how things are moving. There's a realignment happening where the two central parties are no longer the ones domineering. Now, the British political system was basically built for two parties, right? The voting system, so first past the post, when you think about the media coverage, even the parliamentary architecture, the way we talk about politics is all built for two big tents, right? Going back and forth in this sort of adversarial way. I think May the 7th confirms that we are now basically a 5-party system that's still pretending to be a 2-party one. And the pretending is what I think is breaking everything, right? If we start with Labour, let's double click into Labour. The obvious thing, which we have to always remember, is that Labour won a landslide just less than 2 years ago.
Change begins now, and it feels good.
And now it's on track for its worst ever local election performances in modern political history. This is wild. Right? In just 2 years, look at what's happened. Now, if we say why, well, you can pick a reason. I think they all stack up on top of each other. You had the Birmingham bin strike, which still leaves a stench in people's noses. You have Mandelson and what happened with Epstein, the welfare cuts, the winter fuel allowance, one of the first thing, or the winter fuel reversal, I should say. Starmer's personal rating. He is doing so bad. He has the worst personal rating of any Labour leader in opposition, let alone in government, right? And I think the deeper problem with Labour, and this is not a point I've made before, is that Labour won in 2024 by basically not being the Tories. Keir Starmer did not do well to articulate, a vision for the country. He essentially was just not the Tories. And they basically governed in 2025 and 2026 by being a slightly more competent version of the Tories. That's not inspirational. No one's going to vote for that. There's no constituency for that. The voters that the Labour Party have lost on the left, they've moved over to Zach Polanski and the Green, or they've become independents. And the voters they've lost on the right have moved to Reform, who they think are going to, help them channel nationalism and stuff like that. And the voters in the middle, they've just stayed at home, essentially. So unfortunately, Labour is basically losing support on all sides. Now, I think if you want to analyze these results, you have to watch for the sort of northern metropolitan boroughs, right? So if Labour loses controls of places like Thamesides, like Bolton, like Oldham, if it gets hammered in like the West Midlands, this is a canary. Like the Labour Party is essentially walking on stilts. It is done. If we look at the Conservatives or give them a similar treatment, their story is more interesting because now I wrote down here that their decline is structural, right? So it's not like a cyclical thing of, every so often. No, this is a structural issue because they are polling at 18%, and Reform is essentially eating them for lunch in every Leave voting area. And then every sort of commuter belt, that sort of Kent, Dartford area, where the Lib Dems are eating their lunch there as well. And Badenoch's strategy, right, her strategy, and by the way, I like Kemi Badenoch, I think she actually has potential, but her strategy, such as there is a strategy, seems to be, well, I'm going to wait for Reform to implode. And the difficulty for her is Reform is not imploding. Reform has not collapsed. In fact, they're getting stronger, even though in recent times, Nigel Farage has lost a few percentage points. Reform is still getting stronger. My honest assessment is that the Conservative Party, as a sort of national governing party, they may actually not survive this realignment. Right, they could become a sort of Southern English regional party within a decade if something doesn't drastically change. And the people who are inside the party, they don't know what to do about this, right? Because they have no clarity what to do. Do they stay in this sinking ship and essentially sign their political obituaries? Do they leave and join what's been known as the Timmy Tories, right? There are no good options. And so we're still waiting. We're giving Kemi Badenoch time, giving her time to settle into the role. She's doing better at PMQs. But the question is still, what's she going to do? How's she going to actually mount a challenge here? Reform is very fascinating, right? Because Reform is a story almost everyone's going to be discussing. Let me say what I think most people won't say. Yes, Reform is going to take lots of county councils. They're going to do well in Essex, Norfolk, Suffolk, all of those gone, right? All of those look like they're gone. But you have to understand how much money Reform is spending. Farage reportedly has spent £5 million in 4 months, right? Largely in part because Christopher Harbone has pledged or bankrolled the operation, is given more than $9 million, right? £9 million donation. But a question I think people have to ask themselves is, what happens when Reform actually have to govern, right? Running, Essex County Council means like looking after the adult social care, social transport, pothole budgets, hundreds of boring things that decide whether voters can actually trust you. And as it stands so far, Reform hasn't proven itself in that area. Reform still has no real deep bench. I don't think there are any real experienced councillors. There's no policy infrastructure. Yes, they've written a contract to the people, but no deep infrastructure we can start to take a look at. Their entire pitch still is we are the anti-establishment party. And if you watch Nigel Farage on the press round, that's what he talks about. The government is the establishment. We are the anti-government. But what happens when they actually become the government and they have to govern, right? I think the Tories made the same mistake, if you remember, in 2010, because they discovered they could beat Labour by basically saying, oh, no, we're not Labour, right? And I think Reform is about to discover the same thing on a smaller scale in public, right? Either they govern well and become a normal party, in which case they lose that distinctive that makes them Reform, or they govern badly and the voters move on and vote for the next anti-establishment, next party that's claiming to do things very differently. The Green Party, when it comes on, when we talk about the left realignment, they're kind of underrated right now. Like Polanski he's totally rebranded the Greens. And they've become this kind of economically left, culturally serious party in a way the Greens have never been before.
When the rest of us are killing ourselves to create wealth, and hardly any of it is coming back to our communities. It's going somewhere else, upwards to the pockets of the super rich.
I don't think they're going to win many councils, but they will probably win wards in like inner London and Sheffield, Bristol, Norwich. They'll probably come second in places where they never could compete in the past. So the real narrative for them is, can they be seen as an actually serious party that can win, right? This matters because if they become a serious party and have a permanent sort of voter base, now Labour has to do business with them. Labour has to consider them a serious party. And Labour can't just assume they're voters anymore. Labour has to potentially, in a future general election, maybe even strike a deal with them. If the Green maintain a good position, Labour cannot, I don't think, recover the voters with the same messaging they have so far. So now Starmer will be forced to change tact. We'll have to think very differently. You know, when all these things come together, as I said at the start, this is far beyond council seats. The bigger narratives is there is a realignment happening, right? Because for 70 years, Britain or British politics has basically been a competition between two parties that broadly agreed on the contours of society, but disagreed on like the details, right? There was a post-war consensus, there was a Thatcher consensus, a sort of Blairite consensus, if you like. And all those consensuses have collapsed, right? And nothing has replaced them. And we are now in this long period where there's no governing political idea. Reform on one side is offering grievance. The Green Party seems to be offering like an eco-populism sort of thing. Labour, unfortunately, offers technocratic government. And the Tories, I mean, the best thing I can say about Tories is they're offering nostalgia. But like none of them are offering a real story about what Britain is and where Britain is going. And this is still the issue, right? I think the party that wins the next decade it's not just the one that wins May the 7th. It's the one that starts to tackle with that deeper question of like, what's the national story of this country and how do we get people to believe in it? That for me is the bigger issue for those who want to win the realignment. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you agree? Is there a realignment? Am I overplaying this? I would love to know what you think in the comment section.